it is really true that if you get your hands into the dirt and grow things, help things grow, there's a very different relationship. Nature is very healthy for us, right?
Yeah.
And we need to protect it and allow nature to do what it can do, because its wisdom is quite remarkable.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today we will be recording in my home in the Mount Washington Valley of New Hampshire. My guest today is Sue Kaplan. Sue is the founder and senior consultant at Sustainable Futures Consulting. We talk about a lot of different things. We talk about mentorship and why it is fun and feels good. We talk about sustainability and humanism and the overlap between these things and the environmentalist movement writ large. We talk about electoral politics and working in state government, and we talk about democracy and the health of it and how to make it all better and why we are optimistic. We talk about all this stuff and a bunch of other things on this episode of Granite Goodness. I hope that you enjoy it. Sue Kaplan, welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'm excited, and we've had, before this, walked around your land, and nature is so important to me that seeing the excitement you have for what you're going to create out here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you're very generous to humor me and my farm tours. So we are recording this here at Venado Farms in the Mount Washington Valley in Tamworth, New Hampshire, which is also where I live. So we're at my house today in my ramshackle home studio. My dog's here on the table with us. He's asleep. I don't know if you can see him or not, but he'll be joining us. And today I've got Sue, and we did a little farm tour, and I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. We were interrupted by a visit from a bear.
I wasn't there though.
No, you weren't there, and hopefully, but you did see a moose on your way here.
Just trying to find your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he just walked across, looked at the car, walked across the road, and just went into the marshy area. And it made me very happy because it's unusual.
Yeah.
To see mooses,
Moosei.
and but he had a huge rack, so he was an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the magic comes.
Well, there's a funny history. So this is it's the third this will be one of the first, video episodes that, I'm publishing with this show. And the morning that my friend Thomas and I, first went and, did kind of a trial run, we were pulling out of his house in Tamworth, and, I'm like not paying attention. We're there in the car, and he says, hold on, like, stop, there's a carriage behind you, or a horse or something. And I'm like, really? And I turn around, like, there's a guy with a, carriage, and old horses just, it's like 6 a.m, and, we're here in the middle of nowhere. And so there's a thread now of, the video episodes of this, and there being quaint, hopefully charming country features, not interrupting the process, but being present, I would say, between the horses and the carriage and you and the moose. And one of these times I should try and catch something on camera to kind of give because, it's a New Hampshire show. We're here in New Hampshire, and,
But they're elusive.
Right. Yeah.
So even if, like, I had the phone in the car, and I was like, there wasn't time.
Yeah.
It was elusive and just moved on.
But you're here sharing the memory with us.
Definitely.
The experience. So I always talk a little bit about, who people are the introduction. I give them a brief idea of who you are and your work, and I want to hear in your own words, your description of that. But we always like to start out. Could you tell me a little bit about your relationship with the Grant Estate?
I know that that's your favorite question because that's what the podcast is really about.
Yeah.
About great granite goodness. So it's a story, right? So I moved to the Upper Valley in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And my legacy in New Hampshire goes back to the early 1700s.
No kidding.
We have a blended ethnic formula in my family,
Yeah.
but my mom's father's side came across on the Mayflower, and
Whoa.
they were living in, I think, Haverhill, and my mother has been doing genealogy, and for this question,
Yeah.
I said, so when did we come to New Hampshire?
Yeah.
And she said the first record of the family was 1776.
No kidding.
And they basically heard the charge and went down down towards Massachusetts.
Wow.
And so I think it started in Hollis
Uh-huh.
in the 1770s. And then the family lived in Deering for a long time, Deering, New Hampshire. My great-grandfather, I found out that he was born in Lebanon.
Yeah.
My mother's a Manchester girl. And
Love those.
yeah. And
I know a few.
There's a great story about her. We'll probably talk about my mom a lot. But her email
Mm-hmm.
is Old Nan of the Mountain.
That's really cool.
And that was the same. It was like a month or two after the old man fell.
Yeah, regrettably. And what was that, 2004, 2002?
Yeah, I think it's about that. I'm never good with dates like that.
Well, a day
But-
that shall live in infamy.
Yes. And so she's granite rock.
Yeah.
And my folks, so we grew up in Mystic, Connecticut. But Mom, when Dad retired, they moved up to Andover, New Hampshire, which is a family community
Yeah.
on Ragged Mountain, and it's old fishing game club.
Right.
It was created in 1901. My great-grandfather joined in 1911. So while I did go to high school in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd never been a resident, and so people say, "Oh, you're new people," and I said, "Well, actually, we have
Something of a history
and I
in
had
this area.
and I owned my grandmother's cottage on
Yeah.
the mountain, and it's the sense of place
Right.
for me. It's where our family gathers.
Yeah. It's the center of
That's
gravity.
a long stream of family history. But I would say one of the things that I've noticed for decades,
Mm-hmm.
that New Hampshire is 1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I lived in Massachusetts for 30 years. I lived in D.C. and Chicago. And there's an ability to connect with anyone in this state.
Yeah.
And the natural environment is precious for me.
Yeah. Well, there is a real smallness. This is another. I mean, it's a recurring theme of the state, and of course, it's a recurring theme of the show. Is exactly that theme that you're discussing. Of, I mean, even for Tolkien fans, like this comes up too. The Shire, right, is the place where the hobbits live, and New Hampshire being English countrydom and all that. And it's actually really cool. I love everything you just shared. you may be, Sue, possibly like the most historically and familially embodied person in the Granite State, other than like who I know personally. My coworker, who's a very nice guy, his family is related to Josiah Bartlett, who I think was one of the Declaration of Independence signers, and they have the lineage. And he doesn't seem particularly interested in it. He's just like, that's his go-to fun fact is I'm related to this random guy, and he's not even a fan of the West Wing show, which is a shame.
Oh no!
I was like, did you know there's a fictional president named after? And so he's not interested in that. But other than him, like you have a whole history here, and we might even talk about smallness. We might be related. My wife Jess, she has family history on the Mayflower too. I imagine many people do,
yes.
Right? Like probably hundreds and thousands of folks, but I don't know. We could be 32nd.
You never know.
32nd cousins.
Well, I want to pile on about something you just said, is that there are many people who aren't interested in legacy and history and things like that.
Yeah.
And my mother is very interested, and I'm among my siblings, I'm the one who's most interested as well. I don't think either of my sons will have much of it. I mean, although they do say things about my grandfather's legacy. So
Right.
the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
Yeah.
And, so it's really a question of interest.
Right. I mean, you never know. They could. I've taken an interest, a later in life interest in my familial history. Really. I mean, it's crass to say like I didn't care about it, but like, man, all the questions I would ask my grandfather, with the perspective I lacked, and it's a funny example. Like I was visiting with my grandma, who luckily is still living, Eleanor, a couple months ago. Just kind of on this like quest of family history. I'm trying to get in touch with all these people, while they're still around, and I have the time and opportunity to do it. And she said something to me that like I think about all the time. And she said, I'm really glad that like you're here, we're having tea, and you've gone out of your way to like come visit me. This is great. And that you're interested in asking me all these questions about like our family. And she said, you don't care as much when you're an adolescent and you're a teenager, and I was like, yeah, I didn't care. Like I've spent lots of time with you as a teen, and I was never interested until I was kind of an adult. And she said, I was the same way, when I was a teen girl in like, 1938 or whatever. She said, no, my grandparents, I'd see them, but I never asked them questions about their lives. And I'm like, God, my 93-year-old grandmother is, I'm having a sense of empathy with her teenage self. Like, it's just a remarkable, I don't know, connect, like one of those moments where you're like, man, people are they're really quite similar. Or I felt a connection,
I think, particularly when you're young, you're so focused on yourself.
Yeah.
And how do you walk in the world? And I remember probably when I was in my 30s, I was amazed by the women in the 60s who were age-wise
Right.
in the 60s. And so like Bette Midler and Tina Turner,
Yeah.
and something like that. And there is a very big change that happens when you just know who you are.
Right.
And some people get it earlier, and a lot of people don't ever
Yeah.
know who they are. But I think it's expected that younger people, meaning,
Yeah.
adolescents, teenagers, 20s, even 30s, that, they're trying to figure out
Right.
who they are, what they want to do, who they want to be with. So it's I'm sure that your grandmother was thrilled.
There's some grace extended. But maybe if you haven't figured it out by 29 and 3 months and 27 days, there's no hope for you.
That's not true
So-
at all.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Even in the little time that we have been chatting, I've gotten the sense that you're somebody who, you seem very confident in your identity, but you seem like someone who's not afraid of change or of reinventing yourself. You seem like someone who's, done. I mean, I know you are someone who's done and lived a lot of like interesting experiences that I want to hear about, but I don't know. I mean, there's this fear, I think, that lots of folks have. I certainly had it, that like, I'm afraid to. There's this perception of age as a thing that keeps you stationary and I don't know, ossified spiritually and kind of artistically. And I think it's nice to be free of that, when folks get older, but at the same time, like, you do probably have to put effort in to keep, learning. Like, it's so easy for people to stop learning things when they leave,
No one's
the
reading
education
books,
system,
for
right?
instance.
Yeah.
But so one of the values with my husband and myself is curiosity. And that is something that we really have, fingers crossed that our sons have had that in their head forever, that to be curious, to learn more, and not to be stationary.
Yeah.
But if you're not a curious person, and is someone who is, we have a snoozing dog, someone who is comfortable with themselves,
Yeah.
but don't want to, advance in different ways.
Right.
Right. So they're human beings.
Yeah.
Right. And I think being curious is much more fun.
Yeah.
And
It's like, as opposed to what?
yeah.
Just not. I don't care. I don't want to know. Like, I don't know. I'm like you. I can't. We're here talking because I'm interested in you. So.
Thanks. Yeah. I'm curious enough that I have been in like 6 sectors.
Right.
Right. In my work. And, I've worked in Congress, worked for 2 Massachusetts governors, worked for, a very large, formerly very impactful corporation,
Yeah.
Polaroid Corporation, worked with the Harvard Medical Community, Dartmouth Health.
Wow.
And then my last sector was teaching.
Uh-huh.
And, as you know very well, Fiona brings people along.
Yeah.
And I never thought I would teach. So we can talk about that a little bit later at some point. But what I've found now is to really stand in my wisdom, my expertise and my skills, and my character. And having the ability to connect people and their ideas, I always think of that as being my super sauce.
Yeah.
Or superpower. And so by knowing what happens in all of those different industry sectors, it really provides a almost unique perspective.
Yeah.
I don't like unique saying, it's unusual.
Well, yeah. Well,
but-
it's a perspective that a lot of folks probably don't have. They haven't seen or experienced all the different things that you have and can put them together in the way that you can. And, I think people would be foolish to not, I don't know, to look at any problem and say, we're going to discount the wisdom of, this really awesome woman who's, tackled these problems from 6 different places. And, I think you have a lot to offer the world and, people and young people. And, it's a good segue into, your career. So in the order that you just talked about those things, is that chronologically, like when you think about your career, I don't know, define Sue Kaplan. Like, who are you? What do you, is it even possible?
Well, we can take a stab at it. So I've been purpose driven mostly my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was very supportive of me as a strong woman, strong girl first, and then a strong woman. And
that was unusual at, this time in your life. What was this, like the 70s?
Yeah, I think even in the 60s.
Yeah, right.
So I am the middle child, first daughter, and I have said this to many people. I'm not sure that I've said it to my family, but I've always felt like I should have been the oldest. And so I've sort of just plowed through.
Right.
And, did not want to, in that age and at that decade, girls were not really celebrated in the way that the boys were.
Right.
And I just wasn't going to go there.
Yeah.
And so, that is, for a long time, I basically had a bit of a chip on my shoulder.
Right.
Because I was like, wait a second, you talk about the women. Don't keep talking about just the boys or the men and whatnot. So my husband would tell a very interesting story about that with me. So chronologically, if I'm going backwards, no, I'm gonna switch it around again. So not necessarily where I go from the jobs,
right?
But my parents were very active in community actions. My mother was very active in Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
She was the first female Republican town committee in Connecticut, in Groton.
Wow.
And they were just in a number of boards.
Yeah.
And they've just always been contributing.
Yeah.
Right. So public service came for me because my mom was in politics at different points. By the way, she is now a Democrat.
Yeah.
But she was very active in the liberal Republican Party, basically. So being in service can be in any sector.
Yeah.
But when I got out of college from Northwestern, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And I talked to a bunch of people who were really interesting. And one person said, there's a presidential campaign going on. You will learn so much. And that's where I started.
Yeah.
I had, we had a lot of view of what works for like ballots and things like that. I mean, but it's, so looking at campaigns, working in campaigns, doing advance for presidential candidates and things like that across the country is an important opportunity to sort of hear how people are talking about what they care about.
Yeah.
So both from both sides. Well, there are a couple.
Because I want to know.
So my first was Senator Alan Cranston, who is a California senator, and he didn't go very far. He died in New Hampshire in the primary, but he was one of the reasons I was interested in him is because it was about jobs and anti-nuke stuff.
Yeah.
And I've forgotten all of the, the taglines, but so I worked with him for a couple of months. I drove Ed Asner around.
Yeah.
You meet different people when you're in campaigns. So that was the first, and then I worked for a Massachusetts Senator Potential, he was a congressman, and John Kerry won.
Mm-hmm.
But so I worked in this, a couple of months with a senatorial campaign, and then I was doing advance for Geraldine Ferraro,
Yeah.
and she was the first female in the major party to be the vice president candidate. That's a whole story too, because it was, the men
Right.
who gave passes to the young women and older women so that they could be there
Yeah.
when Jerry Ferraro was on the stage and on the podium. And it's one of those very thrilling things. So obviously they didn't get into the White House.
Yeah.
But let's see, so presidential stuff. Then from then on, I pretty much always came to New Hampshire for the primary season, going canvassing,
Yeah.
door to door. And I rode a horse in Manchester with holding a sign, and
Yeah.
that was for Cranston.
Okay.
And it was just, people are just saying, how can you find some visibility?
Right.
And I was one of the few people who knew how to ride a horse. And it was stupid.
Let me show you some visibility.
It was very strange. But I have a newspaper article on it and a photo.
Okay, I'm gonna have to request that, of course. It's
fun.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we had another guest in here, Sarah Palermo, who helps fundraise for the New Hampshire Campaign for Legal Services, and she told this story. She used to do political reporting for a small newspaper, and I think the Keene Sentinel, and we had this conversation about all these hokey traditions, that people, particularly in New Hampshire politics, have to do or don't have to do. And, I love stuff like that. Like I love the gimmicky story you're telling of like you on the horse and, all these times and places where you hear about these people and like, they have to go eat some weird hot dog to endear themselves to rural New Hampshire
Especially
people.
Iowa and New Hampshire.
Right.
A lot of requirements,
Yeah.
right? So you have to go to, for instance, so Mike Dukakis, I wasn't on his campaign. I was a press secretary for him, 87 to 90. And Kitty Dukakis and Mike were getting on a dog sled because, in Laconia.
Yeah.
Right? Things like that. In Iowa, it would be you have to go to the fairs.
Right.
So
Bob
yes,
for apples and
all sorts of funky things. Yeah. One of the things that everyone told us, the more advanced people, never put someone's hat on, never put a candidate, a hat on a candidate.
Why is that?
Because they usually don't look good.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
these are the things that I'd go and put a hat on someone and then I'd ruin the campaign. That's why I'm not.
I love hats.
Yeah.
So, I would probably, if I ever was going to run, I probably would put my own hat on.
Yeah.
Including, I have actually, this is a random thing, I have my great-grandfather's bowler hat.
That'd be perfect.
Yeah, it would be. It's a little bit too big. But anyway.
It'd be your brand, I mean, it's all about, there's that Vermin Supreme guy. He wears a boot on his head.
Yes.
And, everyone remembers. And we know what he's about. It's like free ponies and whatever,
He's interesting.
Yeah.
He definitely is. So
politics and, service, this has been a guiding star
Yes.
for a long time for you.
Yeah. And the reasons probably that I've had a couple of roles that I had for a longish time,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to believe that the people who are working on the goals and whatnot are coming from good purpose,
Right.
right? And also making sure that I continue to create more skills
Yeah.
and to make more impact. And, healthcare is a really great and important sector, but I realized that it wasn't for me.
Right.
It's not, I grew up in hospitals because, I'd go with my dad on the weekends when he was seeing his patients. And it was really important for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really been about sustainability, climate, clean energy. And now I have a lot of people in nature-based solutions
Right.
that I'm learning from. And so I look for innovation. I look for how much impact that I can create. And part of that impact is connecting people with each other
Yeah.
and with their ideas. Because I'm looking at so much content.
Right.
I will say that I'm not, I've never been a silo person.
Right.
And so when you blend and when you weave information together and people together, you don't necessarily be the smartest person on the content.
Right.
But that's sort of my what I walk through. So, for instance, my tagline in my consulting practice is weaving people, nature, and inspiration together.
Yeah.
And at this point in my life, I know who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I know what I care about. And, climate and democracy are my two passions,
Right.
and they have been for a very long time. And although I would say we wouldn't have been talking about climate
Yeah.
as much,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it'd be other things, the environment.
Right.
And it's been hard because both of them are in existential threat.
Right.
And so for me, it's like I have to keep leaning in.
Yeah.
I have so many friends who are retired, and I'm like, why?
Yeah. We need help.
Yeah.
We got work to do.
Well, we need help.
Yeah.
We need to do the work. But honestly, I've said this to, when I was teaching, I said this to quite a lot of my classes and said, basically, I'm not putting it on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your responsibility, but this is going to be your life.
Right.
And I will be a supporter of you.
Yeah.
And, I don't have to be the lead because there's so many brilliant young people that I have met. And it excites me. I always mentored people when I was younger even, but having taught in the sustainability dual major at UNH and also working with partners around something called the Emerging Climate Leaders Collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And that focuses on younger people with, around clean energy, nature-based solutions and climate. And the generations have to work together. We have to collaborate. And, collaboration and community is at the base of what we need to have as a foundation. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's the correct opinion. I don't think there's any other legitimate way that a lot of these things improve or get solved. Not that being solved is like an appropriate or accurate endpoint necessarily, right? But there's always better, right? There's always better than what is happening right now, and that's a good goal to orient against or towards. Something that I wanted to ask about, even just on those two issues, right? Like, you've been doing this work for a long time, and say on climate or democracy, how have the conversations on those two issues specifically changed over the course of your career? Like the way that people talk about, I don't know. I mean, were people concerned about democracy in the 80s and in the 90s?
Well, they didn't see threat that we're looking at. But municipalities, states, national politics, government, there's always things that go wrong.
Right.
But I didn't typically think that there was the threat to democracy that we've had in the last cycles. It's very dangerous. And so I would say no. We knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
Going through campaigns and then working, in the governor's office, the legislature, and it can work really well, and it can work basically, and
right.
sometimes very poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't. Right now, today, the mayor of New York City was in the courthouse.
Yeah.
Right?
I saw that.
So that's their thing,
It's not great.
We don't, we have a legal system.
Oh, right. Yeah. There's accountability
yeah.
if someone, messes up and.
Right. And
supposed to be.
He, of course, did not, say that he is guilty, and he's going to work on it. And there's always something. I mean, there's always been people who are getting money under the table, or, bringing people in, for favors and things like that.
Yeah.
But that's human, and people, you can talk about all of the soft bellies for lawyers or doctors or politicians or anything. But no, the threat, and I'll go back to it, I don't think that I ever felt that the democracy could not just be frayed, but
right.
destroyed.
Yeah.
And as of climate, it's very interesting that so many people have connections to nature, but the majority does not, that's also something about fraying, because, and I won't be able to quote it specifically, but if you don't love something, you won't protect it.
Yeah. And
many people do not have a connection with nature. I have always had that. Both my parents, particularly my mother, was always about getting us in the woods.
Yeah.
And hiking and looking at things, and and I was on the ocean all the time as well, and very curious, and I love marshes and things like that.
Even walking around my farm today, you're like sniffing and nibbling things. It's really cool, like
I don't think I was
no,
nibbling.
you weren't nibbling, but I don't know. It's all like I was enthralled by watching you. You look like a kid in Candyland a little bit, and it's cool to see you have this passion for it. I mean, I love being in nature myself, but I get very confused by plants and plant identification.
I don't. I can't tell you which kind of bird song is either.
I don't know.
But,
You seem very comfortable with it.
well, it's interesting. So I've always looked to the skies,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've always looked at the weather, and that's what I've always been doing. But there's something that changed in the last 6 years or so, and a lot of it had to do with COVID.
Yeah.
And it was also because we bought 43 acres and would be able to just walk around
Yeah.
all the time, every single day with my border collie. But I met people who had a very spiritual relationship with nature, and one of those people is someone who's a very, very strong friend of mine, very wonderful friend. I was learning from her,
Mm-hmm.
and about the land, about the soil, about the trees, about and I had heard about how trees communicate with each other. But when during COVID, my husband built 3 vegetable gardens, raised beds.
Yeah.
And I was creating 3 flower gardens, all pollinators, of course, and all, organic composting. And it is really true that if you get your hands into the dirt and grow things, help things grow, there's a very different relationship. For me, it's just we've listed our house,
Yeah.
and it's one of my friends said, because there was grieving because this land, I've walked all over it,
Right.
and just marveled and learned.
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist, so there's a lot I don't know about, but one of my friends said, nature's everywhere. You will always be there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that was extremely helpful. But for, just to put the point on it, is that nature is very healthy for us. Right.
Yeah.
And we need to protect it, and we need to allow nature to do what it can do, because its wisdom is quite remarkable. I will point out my favorite book, Braiding Sweetgrass.
Hell yeah.
Have you read it?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
No, it's a tome. Everyone loves that book.
It's a Bible.
Yeah.
That's my spirituality, really.
Yeah.
And Robin Wall Kimmerer's writing, being a scientist,
Right.
being a writer, and being,
A naturalist. Yeah. Right.
a naturalist, and also indigenous person.
Right. Yeah.
And that I had been thinking about reading it for a long time, and now it's just like I'm telling everyone, you've got to read this book, because it comes into your body and into your heart.
You know what's funny about that? Like a piece of personal knowledge I happen to have. My sister works in like the publishing world for a small cool magazine, Tin House, and so she knows like, I don't know, she knows like the ins and outs of that whole world. And I don't know the exact publisher, but she was explaining to me once over breakfast. We were on like a family visit or something, and she basically said, the publisher who originally put that book out, Braiding Sweetgrass, like, they're great, but they were not, like, no one saw.
They didn't promote it.
Right. Well, no, they didn't have any idea how huge it was gonna be. You know, like they do similar like environmental books, but something about that book just struck a chord with so many people at the right time. And you know, and she was telling me like, oh, the publishers, it was almost like too much success. You know, it's like a good problem to have. Everyone wants to buy our book, but it was like, whoa, we didn't know that this book was going to be like the bestseller book for like 5 years in a row, and everyone's going to be talking like, which is great. But I think that's so interesting that, I don't know, even people in the world of communicating, you know, works of art and books about that stuff, like, you never know when something is really just going to strike, and then it's going to speak to you and speak to me. Like, everyone of my friends knows this book and they love it, you know, and I love that you know it too. Like, I'm not surprised, but
Do you know when it was published?
I think like a decade ago, maybe
Okay.
like 2022. I don't know for sure. That's just my sense.
Well, it's interesting too because there's a lot more visibility of indigenous knowledge.
Yeah.
It's always been there,
Right.
right? But more and more, it's sort of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, is that understanding more different cultures. But it's not just cultures for indigenous people. That's who they are,
Yeah.
and that's where they are. So it's we come along and can mess a bunch of things.
Right. Well, it's a way of viewing the world, I think, that feels alien to the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the WASP, the WASP worldview, and kind of cultural lineage. It's that I'm when viewed from that lens, I'm not. I mean, I love the book, and I think it. I don't know, something about it, I think, just explained some of that worldview and perspective to people. Maybe it was the right combination of like, oh, this person is, they have the scientific language or the right prose in the right way, or I don't know what it was, but what a miracle that all these people are able to appreciate and say, oh, this is what this woman is saying. I feel something really special, and it's speaking to me. It's great.
So feelings always are in the front, right? I mean, I was at Radically Rural in Keene, New Hampshire, the last 2 days.
Okay,
and
tell me about that more, because I want to go there, and I want to. This is a great event that I've always wanted to go to, and
it's different. I've been at so many conferences.
mm-hmm.
It's very different, right? Because it's all about rural.
Yeah.
There was a Yale, I think he was faculty, Yale guy came up, and it was talking about feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to give you much more information, but one of the things that really popped out is that feelings are the first
Mm-hmm.
things, right? So you can love, you can be scared, you can do all these things, and some of it is very helpful,
Yeah.
and some of it can really move people out of the way. So when you said something about feelings from braiding sweetgrass, that is, I can't imagine that anyone wouldn't feel uplifted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a thing that I was listening to a show the other day, and they were talking about that, how even if you have expertise on something, it's hard to talk, just like if you're talking to someone and they're perhaps ignorant about a topic that you know a lot about, whether your goal is to change their mind or inform them or not, it's often not helpful or productive to begin that conversation with, well, actually, or kind of like the myth busting, like, well, like no one likes annoying know-it-all nerds, you know. Even if you're rationally correct, you know, it's really hard to admit that you're wrong, especially about something that is a feeling, you know. And you know, you can change people's minds. Like, it happens all the time, but
Or do people change their own minds?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the way. That's a better way of thinking about it. So sustainability. I want to hear your perspective. You know, I heard you talking a little bit about you know, ecological design earlier. You mentioned a friend of yours does some interesting work in design, and this is an area that I feel like has changed a lot. You know, the picture of what does it mean to care about the environment. You know, like Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House, and maybe that was gimmicky, maybe it was cool. Like, I don't know, people had a lot of opinions.
He was an engineer.
Yeah, he was pretty smart. A peanut farmer and all that. You know.
Yes.
Which
was a lot more than that.
You need to work hard, to do it. Like, I think it's great that he was like a nuclear engineer, wasn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a peanut farmer. It's like, what more could you want?
Well, sustainability was not a term that many people ever heard about for a long time. When I was at Polaroid, I was basically a pioneer in corporate social and environmental responsibility. And we were working on design for the environment. We were working on life cycle analysis.
Yeah. And
one of my projects was doing a pilot to figure out what we call now as circularity. Is that, you know, I worked with State Farm and Pratt and Whitney and a HEB Global in Texas, which is a grocery store, to figure out whether we could redistribute the materials that were no longer useful and figure out whether we could reuse or recycle or do something else. Polaroid was the first company that took mercury out of the batteries. The Valdez principles, which is when the Exxon Valdez dumped all that oil and then didn't clean it up. They created in Boston, actually, the Valdez principles, and Polaroid was one of the very first sign-ons. And we did one of the first environmental report as well.
Wow.
So this was a long time ago. I mean, it was, for many people in the 90s.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of those things are still not being done.
Right.
And so we didn't say it was sustainability. I do now. I say, I was a pioneer in corporate sustainability, but it's, the words change. What doesn't change is the term greenwashing or green hushing. Green hushing is new.
Yeah.
But for me, sustainability is implicit in everything because, it's the three pillars: people, planet, and profit, or social, help me out here.
Social, environmental governance.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And that, sustainability is for people. Sustainability is for nature. Sustainability is for good progress. And so the terms can change.
Yeah.
The content can expand. But basically it's like taking care of the earth, taking care of people.
Or even just being curious, right? It's kind of just an extension of being curious. Like, how are you doing, tree? I see the through line for, you and sustainability. And this is how I think about it. And I think about this, dumb comic all the time. But I saw it in college, and there's like these people drawn, and they're at a convention, and someone on stage is like, here's what you get if you, learn about or do something with sustainability. You get, better jobs, healthy environment, cleaner air, better quality of life, et cetera, et cetera. And someone raises their hand in the audience and they say, what if it's all wrong and we make a better world for nothing? Like, what if it's all a hoax? It's like you're missing the point of, all you're focused on is, I don't know, the one, like it's the mega issue. It's not just one particular thing. You can apply it to any problem, I feel like.
So I worked under Governor Deval Patrick in Massachusetts, worked for the Department of Energy Resources. And at the beginning, I was focused on energy efficiency and creating, I was the lead person with the utilities to create Mass Save. And one of the things that is wonderful about energy efficiency is because there's a benefit for everyone, right? Sometimes you're much more comfortable in your house, right? It's more efficient, it's less expensive, and then also you're not you're reducing fossil fuels,
right,
and you're reducing international oil or coal or something
right,
like that. So any person could be excited about energy efficiency. We always said that it wasn't sexy, but it was very effective.
It probably means it's you're actually doing the real work. I feel like there's often that's a recurring theme on this program is, so often people doing, like, really making change at the margin on any particular issue. Like it's not the sexy thing. It's often, it's something that
composting isn't sexy,
right. Yeah.
But it's really effective.
Yeah.
Yeah. As long as it's not close to the bears.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to hear you talk about, some of your either favorite projects, or experiences you've had in your career, or, when people come to you or you make these connections, like what's your favorite thing to do, like in this whole world of all the pies that you have your fingers in, connecting people or, I don't know, helping brainstorm ideas. Like, when do you feel most embodied and purposeful in all the things that you do and have done in your life? And it might just not be one thing. You might say, I like to do 7 different things.
Yeah. It's probably a repetition of what I've said before, which is I love the energy of people, and knowing that something good is coming forward. I am amazed by many things and many people, and that I love meeting new people and finding out what they're about, and what are you passionate about?
Yeah.
So I go back to purpose. That what can I do? And now it's, I like to lift up younger people and learn from them. But I think it's one of the reservoir that I have is knowing a lot of things and a lot of people so that I can then weave them together.
Yeah. If you could talk to every young person today, this is your mouthpiece. Like what's a message that you feel like they need to hear that you can give them, or whether it's a guidance or, you know.
Well, everyone has something to bring, right? On one thing. I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction.
Go where you want, yeah.
So, I on my whiteboard, I've had a graphic, and I haven't been able to do it for myself. Having a one moving that's moving. So the sustainability development goals, there are 17 of them.
Yeah.
And typically the UN has used blocks, right? So for the first thing is that my image is a circle with pies, so 17 pies. And then I have circles around scale, so local,
Yeah.
state, national, international, and then there's a way of who are the blenders,
Right.
and the weavers, and so they're moving in and out of those 17 SDGs. So what I believe is that there's, of those 17, everyone has at least one that can dig into, because that's what they love.
Yeah.
And that's what they're good at. And so that, if we could get everyone working on one or two of those,
Yeah.
and then we have those who are integrating them, that we would have go faster and reduce the harm that we've been that human beings have been doing.
Yeah.
And that, so what I would say to young people or middle-aged people or old
anyone,
people
yeah.
is, do what you do best and do what you do love best, and make it important. And I think that would be amazing.
Sue, what makes you optimistic about the future of your work or anything? You've given me plenty of reasons, but I always like to ask.
No, it's a really good question. I am optimistic generally, although I can be down in the dumps sometimes, for
Not
sure.
today.
But I think human beings want to be champions. And, a lot of people want to be lazy, but then when something comes up that they really need to do, when hurricanes come and destroy homes and whatnot, that people come out and help. You always have to look for those who are the helpers. And that's not my knowledge.
Yeah.
But it's, the divisiveness is real in this era, but everyone really can be a helper. And that's probably the crescendo, is just that we can do really good things.
Yeah.
And kind things and joyful things. So
yeah, there's no it's not written in the sky that the world has to be awful or that it can't get better. It's not there.
yeah, there's brilliance all over.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's been really nice chatting with you today, Sue.
I've enjoyed it very much.
Good.
And as I told you at the beginning, because we hadn't met in person.
No, you hadn't. Yeah.
Right? And I said, at the end, there's going to be a hug.
Yeah, of course. All right.
So this was a delight.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to meet and learn about you
Yeah.
as well. And Rooster's pretty cool too.
Yeah, he is
He's
just
just hanging out.
he is living these values all the time. All right. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Andy.
Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.